Hello, everyone, and welcome to UFC Fight Night Kattar versus Emmett. We've got a UFC event in Austin, Texas on June 18th, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern. And as I mentioned, with the headliner Kattar versus Emmett, this is a stacked card coming up with the first fight being Julian Marquez versus Gregory Rodrigues, a middleweight bout. Then we've got Damir Ismagulov fighting Guram Kutateladze at a lightweight bout. Then we've got another middleweight bout with Joaquin Buckley fighting Albert Duraev. Then we've got a welterweight matchup with one of my favorites, Kevin Holland, fighting against Tim Means. For the co-main event, we've got a fight that we've been waiting to see for a couple of months now. Cowboy Cerrone fighting Joe Lauzon. And this fight will take place at the lightweight weight class. And as I stated previously, the main event, Calvin Kattar versus Josh Emmett. I'm very excited to see this one. Let's start getting right into it.
All right, Nick, and that leads us to the first fight of the night. It is a middleweight bout between Gregory Rodrigues versus Julian Marquez. Right now, Julian Marquez has been out of action for over a year. We've last seen him in 2021. Seems he's being out due to a knee injury, while Gregory Rodrigues is coming off a loss. Right now, their odds are Gregory Rodrigues is the betting favorite at a minus 215, while Julian Marquez is the betting underdog at plus 164. Right now, it seems like a lot of people are going for the bigger guy, Gregory Rodrigues, even though he's coming off of a loss. He does have wins over young Park and Dusko Totorovic, who we've seen in action recently. These are impressive wins, having a KO over Young Park and this unanimous decision over the youngster Dusko Totorovic. Julian Marquez as well, coming off that knee injury. It's been some time, and I think fans probably see that, and that probably reflects within the money line. Nick, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, this will be an interesting one, Jose. I think it'll be a good fight stand up wise. I think they match up pretty well standing up, and it's fascinating because Julian Marquez has attempted 5 takedowns in his UFC career and not been successful on any of them. But what's still even more interesting than that is he doesn't mind when it goes to the ground. He has a 3.2 submission average every 15 minutes, and he's shown to be kind of ruthless if he gets a knockdown and to just get on their back and go for a sub. He's got multiple sub finishes, including guillotine, anaconda, and rear naked chokes on 3 different UFC veterans at this point. And I'm really curious to see how he can go moving forward. You did mention that he's been out for a little bit over a year now at this point. He had a couple canceled fights in there, like you mentioned, due to an injury, but I think he's going to come back strong, to be honest. And Gregory Rodrigues does have that kind of side of him that wants to take fights to the ground. He has an over 2.5 takedown average every fight, and I would expect him to want to rely on that if he feels like the striking isn't going his way. But in which case, I feel like Julian is ready for that and will be happy to go to the ground and just try submission after submission. So to me, this is a pretty even fight. But in the end, I kind of lean with the underdog on this one. I don't know about you.
That's interesting, Nick. For this case, I actually lean with the betting favorite. Reason being is Julian Marquez, though he does have some great experience in the UFC, I just think Gregory Rodrigues, he's a lot more technical when it comes to high level, high pressure scenarios. Julian Marquez, he's more of a bulkier guy, and he doesn't mind kind of rushing in and taking a few hits to deliver a good one. He gets not too technical at times when push comes to shove, add a little pressure, and he starts to break technique, get a little sloppy. And he does have a chin, though, and I think he banks on that a lot. And he likes to get scrappy. And I think Gregory Rodrigues, I think overall his reach advantage right now is going to be his advantage. And he has great takedown defense. I don't know if Julian Marquez would be much of a threat to Gregory Rodrigues. I mean, Gregory Rodrigues, he only has 4 submissions himself, but he's no newcomer when it comes to this grappling. I mean, the guy has been training jiu-jitsu for a long time. Obviously, he's from Brazil as well. And Julian Marquez, he as impressive as he is, the Cuban Missile Crisis. I just don't know if has the exact same fight IQ as Gregory Rodrigues. I do think that 3-inch reach advantage as well as his 2-inch leg reach advantage are both going to be a huge factor in this. And Julian Marquez, he has fought, I believe, at light heavyweight before as well. So he will be the bigger guy in this, but I'm looking to see Gregory Rodrigues. He'll be the thicker guy. Let me say Julian Marquez, but I think Gregory Rodrigues will overall be the taller, faster guy, and I think that's going to play a huge role when they engage. I think that Gregory Rodrigues is going to establish a strong clinch game as well as a jab to dominate this fight. Julian Marquez, again, I think it's just his fight IQ. I think he does get a little too sloppy, and I think Gregory Rodrigues is going to take advantage of that and look for openings, especially being the bigger guy in this case.
Sure, yeah, I can agree. There's knockout potential if Julian gets a little loose, get a little sloppy, getting in the clinch and getting aggressive there. So he could take a pop and maybe not end well in that case. But I just don't think that's going to happen, man. I'm happy to take the underdog here. I think plus 164 is great money. I'm just not convinced. Look, Gregory Rodrigues fought literally just 4 months ago, went to a split decision loss. So yeah, you could argue he won the fight, but took a lot of strikes in that. I'm just not convinced he's going to be able to bounce back 4 months later and just continue to put out this pressure and continue to take these hits. So yeah, I'm glad to take the underdog money here. I'm going to go Julian Marquez.
That's a great pick, Nick. I understand why you've done it. You really can't argue with Julian Marquez. He does have a 100% finish rate. But that being said, Rodrigues has a high finish rate of 82% himself. So that being said, I'm going to go with the betting favorite in this one with Rodrigues.
All right, Jose. Second on the main event here for UFC Fight Night, we've got Damir Ismagulov fighting Guram Kutateladze. This is going to be interesting, Jose. Damir's the favorite, minus 170. Guram being the underdog at plus 132. Both of these guys coming off some pretty hefty win streaks. Granted, Guram only has that one win in the UFC. So if you include some of his pro wins before the UFC, he's on a pretty hefty win streak. But nonetheless, Damir's been pretty impressive himself too, putting up a 4-0 record in the UFC with all four of those fights going to unanimous decision in his favor. So this will be interesting. Guram barely scraped past winning his first UFC fight and looked quite damaged afterwards and admitted it was a really tough fight, a really tough opponent, and he felt that he had a lot of room to improve. But since then, this is back in 2020. He went through some injuries, had some fights canceled, this and that, and he's finally making his return. So it's a quite anticipated return for the Georgian Viking, and it's going to be interesting to see how he steps in there.
Yeah, I most certainly agree, Nick. This is definitely an exciting one. That being said, yeah, Guram, his split decision in the UFC definitely raises a lot of questions, though. Still, what is this guy made of? He's coming off spectacular first round KO and TKO before he came into the UFC. And Damir, he's been nothing but consistent with unanimous decisions, racking up high points. I think it's no question why he's the betting favorite here. I think a lot of people, it's just what it shows is they just have a lot of confidence in this fighter in terms of how consistent and he is, especially with that UFC experience. That does say a lot. And to me, I do kind of question a bit when I see Guram meeting that split decision. And yes, you can always argue, well, if he was judged a little bit differently, he would have gone his way. But we're going by the books, what's said down on paper, and he does have the power to end it with 7 KOs. Crazy. He has the power, but again, I think Damir, his experience and also kind of going along with the last fight too, is fight IQ. To me, that's everything right now. Just what are you gonna do in these situations when the pressure's on? And I think Damir, he can coast to a victory. I mean, this guy, he throws 3.75 punches landed per minute. He can just throw a high volume all day, and he can just stay consistent, And Guram, he absorbs strikes too. He absorbs 3.47 per minute. For me, just looking at those little details right there alone, I see Damir kind of coasting another unanimous decision. I think Guram in this case is going to have to finish Damir early. That's how I view it, Nick. I'm going with the more experienced UFC vet here.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said about having that fight IQ and UFC experience. I totally agree, and then that's kind of why he is favored. It is worth mentioning though, Mateusz Gamrot, the fighter that Guram did go to split decision with in the UFC, is definitely not a familiar name to most, but is a very good fighter. That's his only loss in his UFC record. He's 3-1, and he subbed with a Kimura sub Jeremy Stevens in the first round. He knocked out Diego Ferreira in the second round within the last 2 years, all after losing to Guram. So I think that's a very respectable, close win. So it's not like Guram barely won against some bum. I think that's a pretty impressive win nonetheless. But even then, Damir is getting some pretty impressive wins on his own. He's displaying his fight IQ, like you stated, and Guram to me is just a little bit too one sided. He hasn't been able to show an ability to grapple or at least be confident doing it. He might have some ability to get on the mats and wrestle and get down to it, but he hasn't proven that. He is, from what I understand, he is actually good friends with Kamzat. I'm not sure they actually train together or anything, but they are Swedish dudes, and that might give him some like motivation, or he might reach out to the Kamzat and get some advice on how to improve his well-rounded ability outside of just striking. But until I see that actually happen inside the octagon, I agree with you. I'm just not going to lean on it. I'm going to go with the fight IQ. I do lean Damir, and it's hard to say anything but by decision. He just hasn't shown necessarily the like straight up knockout power, but he's got consistent volume, like you mentioned. He has the ability with 1.75 takedowns per fight. He can if he wants, but he will not try sub attempts. He has not tried a sub attempt actually once in his 4 UFC fights, but he is willing to get on the ground and control you a little bit and give you some time, ground trouble. So if it does come to that, I'll still take Damir on the ground. So regardless, it's a minus 170 bet. I'll take that, but I'll also go so far as to take Damir by decision.
You guys heard it there. Both Nick and I, Damir. All right, and for the next fight, it's an exciting middleweight bout. We have Joaquin Buckley versus Albert Duraev. Right now, Joaquin Buckley is the betting underdog at plus 162, while Albert Duraev is the betting favorite at minus 210. Joaquin Buckley, everyone knows him from that crazy spinning KO he had a couple years ago. Since then, he's come off with another impressive win via second round KO against Jordan Wright. And after that, he lost on the first round, but he's picked up two wins after that, back to back, getting another KO again in the third round and a split decision, showing that he can still do it. On the other hand, Albert Duraev, he himself is coming off an impressive win streak. He is got it all: decisions, submissions, TKOs. This is an exciting one, Nick. I'm really excited to see what Joaquin Buckley is going to bring to the table. A lot of people back then thought he was the next biggest thing, especially with that viral knockout he had. And I felt like since then he's felt a lot of pressure that he needs to deliver something spectacular like that every time. And I'm afraid that thinking that way has also cost him. He's always just looking to get a knockout in a crazy, exciting way that it's left him to take on some big hits where they were not necessary, Nick.
Yeah, that's probably not a bad idea at all, actually. That might be part of why he has kind of struggled in and out of some of these fights when he got knocked out to a head kick on his own back January 2021. So it will be interesting to see if he can kind of break that mindset of needing to just make these highlight plays every time he steps in the octagon. I mean, he's 28 years old. So in the UFC world, he's barely going to be starting to hit his prime at this point. So, he did have a lot of expectation after getting that big spinning knockout kick, but even then, granted that that's been 2 years since then. So he's had 2 more years of experience. So it will be interesting if he can utilize that and kind of break that mold and just go into fights trying to win them in any possible way instead of trying to get these highlight, because a guy like Albert Duraev is someone that you really need to be concerned about fighting against. After his Dana White Contender Series submission in the first round, he showed a pretty good outing against Roman Kopylov, outstriking him, getting a takedown, trying to get the submission and failing, but overall having over 5 minutes of control time in that fight and just getting the general dominant win for the unanimous decision. So just that alone leads me to lean towards Albert Duraev's grappling ability. Joaquin Buckley is much more of a striker and, like you mentioned, highlight kind of guy. He's trying to get those knockouts, and most of his UFC wins are knockouts, but he still has attempted multiple takedowns in his UFC career, averaging two every fight. And if that's something that he's going to try and rely on to take solace from the striking game, it's just not going to work for his favor in this fight. And I think that's kind of why he is the underdog. He may be able to get that big Showtime knockout on Duraev, but I'm just not convinced that's going to be the case. Statistically, Duraev matches Joaquin Buckley in strikes landed per minute and has less strikes absorbed, showing that he's more of a counter striker, maybe, and he's not necessarily just pressing forward, trying to get action shots all the time. So that would be my main concern betting on Joaquin here, and that's kind of why I lean towards the favorite. Excuse me.
Yeah, that's fair enough, Nick. For this fight, I'm actually leaning towards the betting underdog. And here's my reason why. Physical matchup wise, they're almost identical. They're both Joaquin Buckley only actually has a 1 inch reach advantage, and that being said, he is a bit shorter. He's 5'10" as well, just 1 inch shorter. But that being said, that's not much of a difference for me where I can see Albert Duraev being dominant on the feet, utilizing any striking distance. And yeah, he'll probably have stronger grappling. Joaquin, he has virtually no wins via submission. Again, most of them are KO. Out of his 10 out of his 14 wins are through KO and TKO. But that being said, as well, I think Joaquin just overall has more experience in terms of better competition. I mean, before he was even in the UFC, he also had an extensive time with Bellator and LFA, big organizations to get great experience in, and Shamrock FC as well. But the biggest one being Bellator. These are great organizations to get experience stepping into the UFC. Duraev, M1 Global is pretty respectable, but he hasn't. I'm not sure about the other organizations and what kind of level of competition he was really facing. And that win over Roman Kopylov, that's also, Roman, he was looking impressive coming into the UFC, but his first two fights in the UFC have both been losses. He got rear naked choke in the third round in his first fight. So Albert Duraev was already coming against a guy who lost his UFC debut. And that, again, that just to me says a lot about what was the level of competition they were going against before they got into the UFC, and him beating them didn't really say much to me. I mean, right now, Kopylov is riding out a 2-fight losing streak in the UFC, so he has yet to get a single win in the UFC. And Albert Duraev, yeah, he only has that one fight via unanimous decision against Roman, and he has that submission neck crank first round off Dana White's Contender Series. But again, that's also the Contender Series, not legit UFC caliber fighters yet. I think Joaquin Buckley, I think he's going to have it. I'm almost surprised that he was the betting underdog by this much, being a plus 162. I don't know. I think this one's maybe something where people have it wrong. So I'm going to go with the underdog in this one with Joaquin Buckley. And I'm going to go as much as say like he will get that spectacular KO somewhere within the first 2.5 rounds.
Sounds good to me. All right. In this one, we're disagreeing. I got the favorite, Duraev, and Jose's got the underdog, Buckley. All right, Jose, for the third to last fight of the night, we've got Tim Means facing off against Kevin Holland, a welterweight bout with one of my favorite fighters, Kevin Holland. I love coming and seeing this guy show up in the ring. He always puts a show. He's a minus 245 favorite right now on FanDuel. Tim Means being a plus 186 underdog. Jose, this is going to be an interesting fight. It seems like these are going to be two guys that are kind of prepared to duke it out, standing up. Neither one of these guys really like to favor their grappling skills or ground skills or anything like that. There has been a time or two where Kevin Holland has gotten a submission, but in most cases, he ends up doing most of his damage standing up. So this could be one of the more interesting fights of the night, just in terms of who's going to get the fight of the night money here, because I think these guys are going to come ready to duke it out.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. I'm excited to see Kevin Holland come back to the welterweight division. I think he's going to do better here than what he did at 185. He looks really good for his size, and Tim Means, I don't know if this is going to be a tough test to him. Kevin Holland has already gone against experienced fighters, like example, Jacare Souza, Derek Brunson, and we see how he does against those type of guys. He won against Jacare Souza and against Derek Brunson. he got neutralized with just being held down in the wrestling. And since then, he has gone to go seek out wrestling, coaching. And I know he's reached out to DC, Daniel Cormier, and just other wrestling coaches as well. And he's done training out in AKA in California. And I that's the thing. Like you mentioned, you don't know if this is going to be much on the ground, and I agree with that. And that being said, maybe this fight, Kevin Holland, I can see him coming and pressing forward. He's exciting. He's extremely unpredictable, and he can finish people. I mean, he's coming off, an impressive welterweight debut against Alex Oliveira, getting a TKO in the second round, and then again before that, he had his last win before that was against Jacare Souza, and that was at 185, and he KO'd, UFC, just an MMA overall legend, and he KO'd him. And the way he did it from the bottom was extremely impressive. Like how he just stood up and just knocked him out, like from the bottom, got up, punched, rocked him, and just knocked him out against the cage. It was amazing to see. And other than that, he has phenomenal, someone who we just talked about earlier in the night, Joaquin Buckley. He has a TKO win over him in the third round. Tim Means, he's been in the UFC for a while. I don't really know what he's going to bring to the table that's going to surprise Kevin Holland. I don't know what he's going to necessarily do to challenge him. Kevin Holland, he is hard to finish, and I don't know if I see Tim Means at all finishing him. He does have 19 KOs, but he hasn't had them as of recently. I mean, as you can see, he is on a 3-fight winning streak, but he's not been finishing people as of lately. He's been winning more via unanimous decision, and his wins were, the biggest name I see off his last 3 wins against Nicholas Dabley, Mike Perry, and Laureano Staropoli. Mike Perry, that's the biggest name that he got unanimous decision win, but even then he couldn't finish him. So, yeah, for this fight, it's a fun one to see, but I'm more excited because of the Kevin Holland aspect. Not so much no disrespect to Tim Means, but I am kind of leaning towards Kevin Holland in this one. I'm not sure. How about you, Nick?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely leaning towards my guy Kevin Holland in this one. I I fully expect him to kind of continue to press forward, be wild, and be a little too much for Tim Means. I think your point about Kevin Holland's size is a pretty valid point. Coming on from fighting in middleweight at a couple fights and being relatively successful, but not fully successful. I think he's a big guy to fight in this division. And he's got that really large reach advantage of 6 inches, it looks like, over Tim Means. I think those things are just going to really favor in Kevin Holland's side. And I think that kind of goes to show why he's a minus 245 favorite. I don't quite know if this is going to be a knockout situation, but I can say for sure that Kevin Holland has never been knocked out. So I fully expect him to at least be ready to go the full 15 minutes. And just that being said, and Tim Means being the grizzled veteran he is, I would probably lean over 2.5 rounds. But in the end, I definitely take Kevin Holland in this one.
And there you have it, folks. Both Nick and I for Kevin Holland. And now for the co-main event of UFC Fight Night, we have Donald Cerrone versus Joe Lauzon. Nick, I'm really excited about this fight. This is 2 UFC legends finally, after so long being in the UFC, are finally get a chance to go at it. Right now, you're looking at Donald Cerrone as the betting favorite. He is the betting favorite at minus 184, while the returning Joe Lauzon is a plus 142 underdog. It's been a minute since we've seen Joe Lauzon. Again, we haven't seen him since his last win against Jonathan Pierce back at UFC on ESPN 6 back in 2019. He had a first round TKO win after coming off 3 losses, 2 by TKO and 1 by majority decision. A lot of people thought it was time for him to hang it up, after those 3 losses, came back, got that 1 TKO. He's not quite ready to hang it up yet. He thinks he has 1 more left in him. That's why he's coming back. And depending on how he does against Donald Cerrone, that's when he says he'll decide whether he's going to for surely retire or not. On the other hand, we see Donald Cerrone. He's coming off multiple losses. Right now, he is unfortunately riding a 5-fight losing streak, which comes from the likes of Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje, Conor McGregor, Anthony Pettis, and Alex Morono. Things have not been looking too bright for Donald Cerrone, but yet he's opening up as the betting favorite here, Nick. That just says a lot about the respect people have over Donald Cerrone, but I don't think people should overlook Joe Lauzon as well. He's a legend. He's done phenomenal things when he made his UFC debut back in 2006 when he beat James Pulver. One of the original UFC fighters in terms of he was like the first lightweight champion, and that was huge back then. That was just a nobody that came in and burst into the scene, and he's surprisingly never really got the title, but he is a legend himself and has a name for himself within the UFC. So I'm extremely excited, but surprised by the odds, Nick.
Sure, yeah, I can kind of see where you're coming from. They're both legends in their own right, and I think I can understand the public side of you in taking Cowboy. I think obviously the name value is a little bit higher. He's just definitely more popular of a fighter, so that accounts for some of it. And some of the experience too. I mean, Joe Lozon's been there, done that with a lot of top end fighters. But the list of fighters that you listed that Cowboy lost to in this losing streak are some fighters that Joe Lozon would absolutely have loved to fight. A guy like Conor McGregor in his prime. I mean, stuff like that is just not quite where Joe Lozon's been. So I think that, just the fact that Cowboy's been in the public eye for those big time major fights, multiple UFC pay-per-view events, just as recently as 2020 when Joe Lozon's been absent for since 2019. So I think it's just more of the recency bias and things like that as to why Cowboy is the slight betting favorite. But again, I don't think that means we need to sleep on Joe Lozon. He's an incredible striker in his own right. I think Cowboy might have a slight standing advantage, but I mean, he got knocked out by Alex Morono in the first round back in 2021. So it's not like Cowboys some elite striker. So I agree. I don't really know if I see a whole a big enough difference in the stand-up game here for me to put my money down on Cowboy. I'm not necessarily saying that Joe Lozon is going to be able to, strangle Cowboy and wrestle him this and that, but he does have a 2.39 takedown average per 15 minutes, and if he does feel a little heat from Cowboy, I think he can maybe lean on that a little bit and slow the fight down on the ground if he needs to. Uh, Look, Cowboy's never been submitted, at least in the UFC, so I don't really expect this to be a situation where Joe is able to get a submission on Cowboy. But I really think this is going to be a lot closer of a fight than most.
Yeah, Nick, I absolutely agree. I think when it comes to the ground and grappling game, Joe Lozon, I believe, definitely has the advantage, but Donald Cerrone just as well has superior grappling. So it could, maybe be actually dead even. They both have great takedown defense. They both they both just have long reaches as well. So I don't think them kind of down Cerrone has just like that, like you mentioned, the slight reach advantage, but not by much. So I can see Joe Lozon just being they both have such high fight IQ. But in this case, I can see Joe Lozon being the more calm, collective fighter. It seems like Don Cerrone's been kind of having some nerves and other things go on in his head outside fighting. He always talks about how nervous he gets before his fights, and I don't see this fight being any different. It seems like late, when it's the time he needs to shine the most, he doesn't really live up to the expectations, and this, could be either guy's retirement fight. Don Cerrone can come in and completely put on a beating on Joe Lozon and get the majority decision. Joe Lozon retires, or vice versa. Joe Lozon can come in, beat him up, and Don Cerrone retires. Joe Lozon, though, you say maybe you don't see Don Cerrone having to worry much about the submission, but um, I don't know. I think, yeah, like Don Cerrone, I can see him, knocking out Joe Lozon, but I actually can see Joe Lozon submitting and getting a rear naked choke on Don Cerrone. Like you said, it hasn't really happened before. But I never want to say never. I just think it is just a critical moment in both fighters' careers. And that being said, we've not seen much of Joe Lozon, but that also tells me like he's hungry. He is writing off less of a loss streak compared to Donald Cerrone. So that's why for this fight, I am going to side with Joe Lozon. He overall has, I think he has a 2.39 takedown average. Um, and so I think he is going to take the fight to the ground. And I think Donald Cerrone is going to be comfortable going to the ground. But I can kind of see Joe Lozon pinning down Cerrone and kind of smothering him out, maybe throughout the entire fight. And with his 2.04 submission average, I do believe he is going to try to sink in that rear naked choke at some point. So that being said, yeah, Down Cerrone really needs to show up on his A game and use his superior kickboxing skills and reach advantage with his kicks, and just get those right angles and set up the great combinations like he did against Rick Story when he landed that amazing combo that landed with a head kick. He needs to kind of do that again. That's the Down Cerrone that needs to show up, not the one that showed up the last few fights, like the one against Conor McGregor, for example.
Definitely some great points, Jose. So, in the end, yeah, I don't have too much more to add on that. On top of that, so I'm gonna go with Joe Lauzon as well. Specifically, I'm gonna take this by decision. I personally don't think either guy's gonna get a submission or a knockout here. I think it's gonna be bloody. I think it's gonna be hard fought. But in the end, I think Joe Lauzon is just going to show a little bit more of a well rounded ability, both standing up and on the mats. Therefore, I'll take Joe Lauzon by decision.
I like that, Nick. You guys heard that here? Nick, Joe Lauzon by decision, and I myself, Jose, Joe Lauzon by submission.
And for the main event for UFC Fight Night in Austin, Texas, on Saturday, June 18th, we've got Calvin Kattar facing against Josh Emmett in a featherweight bout that has huge implications on the division. We've got Calvin Kattar here at a minus 245 favorite on FanDuel, facing up against the underdog at plus 186 with Josh Emmett. Jose, this is going to be a really fascinating fight. Like I mentioned, huge implications on the featherweight division here. We've got a guy, Calvin Kattar, who's fighting, or excuse me, who has fought against the guys who are either defending the belt or being the challenger to the belt in this division as we speak, in Max Holloway, Dan Ige, and some other big names. He's only lost to the top end talent, but these guys are strikers that he's losing to. So it's going to be interesting because Josh Emmett is a guy that is to be feared in the ring. He's coming off a 4-fight win streak with plenty of big names in there, and 2 of those 4 being KOs. Just brutal. He's on a streak that not many fighters can say that they've been able to get through. Shane Burgos, Dan Ige. Those were by decision, but in the end, we've got 2 hot fighters right now, and it's going to be a matter of which one of these guys can come out here and potentially make a run to challenge the belt next.
Oh yeah, Nick, absolutely. This is going to be an extreme fun one. I don't know if this is going to make it to the end of the 5th round. You have 2 guys with knockout power, one hit lights out either guy. That's the way I see it for this fight. Yeah, and as you mentioned, Kelvin Kattar, he's fought some of the best. Former champ Max Holloway. A lot of people like to say Kelvin Kattar has elite boxing. And it's hard to argue when he does have the 5.19 significant strikes per minute. But hey, that's nothing when it's compared to Max Holloway. Max Holloway put on a clinic when he fought Kelvin Kattar, and that fight, a lot of people thought it should have been stopped. Max Holloway just completely outclassed Kelvin Kattar, and that was the type of fight where it can change a fighter. A lot of people can come, they won't come back the same. Like it's almost like, hey, this guy was extremely exposed. Look how much better this other fighter is compared to him. But that being said, Kelvin Kattar kind of shut people up, and he showed he almost looked like Max Holloway himself when he fought him, and he just came in and complete outclassed rising contender Giga Chikadze, and he put on the clinic with him and showed off his elite boxing. And that being said, Josh Emmett, this guy, he is a strong powerhouse guy. He has wrestling. He doesn't use it as much because he's extremely excited to just put people out. He has some phenomenal knockouts over big names like Ricardo Lamas, Michael Johnson, and Mirsad Bektik. That being said, his 4-fight winning streak before that, he fought Jeremy Stevens, and that's another guy known for great knockout powers. So I kind of like the featherweight division a lot with all these guys with hands. It's a small division, the smaller guys, but I just like that the power a lot of those fighters are bringing in. Jeremy Stevens brutally knocked Josh Emmett out, and Kelvin Kattar, he knocked out Jeremy Stevens in a pretty brutal fashion way. So this is an exciting fight, Nick. It's literally up in the air for me on this one. Both have phenomenal knockout power. And for this one, I'm gonna probably have to go with the the taller guy with the better reach advantage. For this one, being Kelvin Cater. How about you, Nick?
Sure. Yeah, Jose, I wanted to piggyback off of your point. I think you made a great point in just terms of Calvin Cater's ability to come off of that loss against Max Holloway and kind of show then he's going to dig deep and grow from his losses and not just get down on himself. And obviously, he did put on a striking clinic against Giga Chikadze, but also I was fascinated to see that he tried 7 takedowns and landed 2 of them in that fight. And that's just one thing I like to see a fighter clearly reinvent parts of their game to obviously go towards the opponents they're fighting against. Not that I think Josh Emmett is weak in the ground game or anything, but I just think Calvin Cater is showing more steps to improving his all-around game as a fighter. And Josh Emmett is also improving for each fight. He's able to beat bigger and bigger names, but I'm not seeing his overall game changing as much. So yeah, I hear you. I think it is nice too that Calvin Cater has a 5-inch height advantage and I think a 2-inch reach advantage. So that those little things can go a long ways in fights that I think are going to be absolute brutal brawls. Like you mentioned at the beginning, these guys have the potential to just knock each other out. I mean, this could end in the first round. It could end in the last 10 seconds of the third round. These guys are going to be swinging and they're going to be swinging hard, but in the end, I think I agree. I'm going to lean Calvin Cater on this one. I I really almost want to say by KO. I think he's got the ability to knock almost anyone out in this division. And like you mentioned, he's knocked out guys like Jeremy Stevens that previously have brutally knocked out Josh Emmett. It is kind of a by proxy situation, but in the end, it just to me shows that Calvin Cater has the ability to absolutely just put someone on the tarmac unconscious. So my final bet will be Calvin Cater by KO.
Yeah, Nick, I like that pick a lot. That being said, I would have to say, yeah, I would lean towards Calvin Cater, and it'd be hard to say any other way other than KO. Josh Emmett, I can, they can make it to the final 5 rounds and make it the decision, but I only seen that happening with guys that put on a heavier volume of punches against Calvin Cater, like Max Holloway and Zabit. Those guys have long reach advantages for sure, and they throw high volume of punches. Those are the type of guys. Calvin Cater, if he can make it to the end of the 3 or 5 rounds with them, he can definitely make it against someone where he has the reach advantage to the end of it. And that being said, I think it will just make it that much easier for him to get to for him to knock out his opponent. So I'm with you on this one. I like you have Kelvin Cater via KO.
And now for the betting portion of UFC Fight Night, Cater versus Emmett. We're going to briefly break down here at Moneyline MMA our best picks, underdog, lock, and our parlays for this week. Before we head right into that, please remember to subscribe to us at Moneyline MMA on YouTube and give us a follow as well on Twitter with the same handle at Moneyline MMA. We're going to continue to put out this content for you guys week to week. I've now have 2 straight weeks of nailing all the parlays, and we're continuing to make money here. So if you guys want to make money with us, please feel free to support us and let us know in the comments if you guys have any extra thoughts. That being said, I'll get right into it. Jose and I have Cater by KO as our top bet of the week here, or at least one of them. Cater is the kind of guy who is, as we discussed, he is going to get all of Josh Emmett on this, but I think he's going to get that knockout within the first 5 rounds. We're going to take Joe Lauzon by points. I think that's going to be another toughly contested fight, but in the end, we're going to take Joe Lauzon to beat Cowboy Cerrone in the battle between the legends. Finally, with our third best bet of the week, we're going to take Damir Ismagulov by points. Jose and I just believe that he will be able to dismantle Guram. And that being said, we're not quite sure he'll get the submission or the finish early, but he will get that victory by decision. Going into the underdog of the week, I'm sure you could have predicted it. Given one of our best bets is on Joe Lauzon, we're going to go ahead and name him our underdog of the week. He is someone that's not necessarily getting slept on, but I just don't think people are putting the respect on his name. He's been around for just as long as Cowboy, and I think he's going to give Cowboy all he can handle. Our lock of the week is going to be Kevin Holland. He's got Tim Means, who's a brutal fighter, but I think Kevin Holland's going to get the best of him in that fight. So you can rest assured to put your money down on Kevin Holland. Our lock's only lost once in the past 7 or 8 weeks. So you can rest assured that that money will hit. That being said, if you guys are interested in making even more money than just taking some of the favorites, we're going to give some parlays here. And again, as I mentioned previously, these parlays are on fire. So at least consider putting your money down on the low end parlay. But if not, if you've got a couple extra dollars, as you'll see, you can win a lot of money with just a couple dollars on some of these parlays. So to get right into it, we're going to go back to our locks, and we're just gonna insert Duraev, Kattar, and Holland. Those are three guys that we're very confident are going to win. And that three leg parlay is plus 191 on FanDuel. That's a nice simple bet of all favorites that is really relatively likely to hit for a good return. But if you guys are looking for a little bit more, go ahead and jump on that underdog of the week that I'm talking about. Add Joe Lauzon into that parlay and then make it a 4 leg, and it will be at plus 604. To me, that's the best parlay to look at this week. If you want to swap out Duraev for Damir, that's totally understandable. We're confident in either of those guys. So those are really interchangeable. But to get into our high level parlay, we're going to add them both in. So Duraev, Kattar, Holland, Lauzon, and Damir. And that 5 leg parlay will be plus 1,018 on FanDuel. Personally, I'm going to be putting some money down on that one. It's been on fire lately, and you guys can trust that it has a high chance of hitting. So, again, please give us a follow on our socials and let us know in the comments any feedback or suggestions you guys have. And thank you for listening, and we'll be back again next week.